the bloody crackdown on protesters there has left dozens dead in what is the greatest challenge yet to President Bashar al-Assad's 11 years in power. The demonstrations are considered a rare and remarkable scene of dissent in a country which is tightly controlled. Journalists are being prevented from entering the southern town of Deraa, but Al Jazeera's Zaina Hodder was able to enter to film this exclusive report.
This is a city draped in black and a city raging with anger. For the past week, Deraa has been burying their dead. Demonstrators killed while clashing with security forces. Dozens are believed to have died. People here say at least 150, far higher than the figure of 37 provided by the state. This woman lost her son. Overwhelmed by grief, she couldn't tell her story, but others told theirs. They claim state security police used excessive force against protesters. Thousands took to the streets to demand those responsible for the killings be brought to justice.
People here are angry. What they're saying is that whoever decides to kill their own people is a traitor. There has been a lot of blood that has been spilled here. People are vowing revenge.
The old city of Deraa has been and continues to be off limits to journalists since the clashes began over a week ago. We managed to enter Friday morning with the help of some local residents. The government has been trying to contain the unrest. Authorities released all those detained on Thursday night and promised to look into lifting the emergency laws, concessions that did little to calm tensions here. People remain scared, too afraid to speak freely. The president said yesterday he's going to improve your...
We want to, these steps must be done, not only promises. There is lots of promises, but nothing was done.
Is this a revolution against the regime?
No, no.
What is it?
Changing some rules, some unjustified rules only.
Changing. Like what?
Emergency law. Emergency law.
But he promised to do that.
We are waiting.
The authorities say it was no coincidence the unrest in Syria began in this city. They point the blame at what they call foreign elements who have been smuggling weapons across the border, a claim people here dismiss. Activists dubbed Friday to be the day of dignity, a word repeated time and time again in this city, just like the words freedom, justice, reform. No calls, however, for the downfall of the regime, at least for now. Zaina Hodder, Al Jazeera, Deraa.
Well, Zaina is now back in the capital, Damascus, and joins me from there. Zaina, you were talking about the anger in Deraa, but we've seen protests move further afield to other towns and villages in Syria. Tell us about that.
Well, yes, there were protests in various cities yesterday, anti-government protests which were called for really in solidarity with the people of Deraa. In the city of Sanamin, which lies just in between the road between Damascus and Deraa, some 20 protesters were killed. They were trying to march to Deraa when security forces opened fire. Funerals are expected to take place today. We're monitoring the situation there to see whether or not there will be more unrest. In Deraa, 2 protesters were also killed late yesterday when they tried to tear down a statue of the late President Hafez al-Assad. Security forces opened fire. So there's a lot of blood that has been spilled, especially in the south, and that's where the anger is, really, and that's where the unrest began. It was concentrated in the south, but it seems to be spreading to other areas.
Okay, Zaina, thanks very much indeed for that. Zaina Hodder updating us from Damascus there. Let's have a look at the background to the president and his family. The Assad family has held a tight grip on power in Syria for more than 40 years. It started with the current president's father, Hafez al-Assad, who, as general and commander-in-chief of the Syrian Air Force, staged external and internal coups to take leadership in 1970. As leader of the Ba'ath Group, his repressive grip on power included a deadly campaign against opposition. It included ordering a crackdown on a revolt in Hama city in 1982, which left between 17 and 40,000 dead. Despite several attempts to overtake him, Hafez held onto the presidency for 30 years, eventually passing it on to his son in an uncontested election in 2000. In the past 11 years, Bashar al-Assad has failed to lift strict emergency laws used during his father's leadership to incarcerate thousands of political prisoners. He's also presided over a rule criticised by observers as having one of the worst human rights records in the world. Let's speak to Malid Al-Abdeh, a Syrian journalist based in the UK, who joins me now live in London. Good to talk to you. One of the things that was interesting from our reporter who was talking to a lot of the protesters in Daraa was that they weren't calling for regime change. Political reform, yes, but downfall of the regime, no. Do you think that that is a true reflection of what people in Syria want?
Well, I think people in Syria are genuinely afraid to call for the downfall of the regime. It's still taboo. Despite the protest, people are still very afraid to call for the downfall of the regime, because that essentially means the death penalty. So people are calling for reform, but in actual fact, on the ground, they are tearing up pictures of Bashar al-Assad, they are toppling statues. So the widespread feeling is that the bloody crackdown has delegitimized the regime. And the absence of Bashar al-Assad since the protests began perhaps makes people think that Bashar al-Assad is somehow in collusion with the security forces in ordering this crackdown. So it's actually very important for Bashar al-Assad to appear on television and for people to see him and for him to condemn what has happened. Because otherwise, if he doesn't appear on television, then obviously the widespread perception is that he's condoning the bloody crackdown, and people will then start demanding his downfall and that of his entire family.
It was hoped, wasn't it, when Bashar al-Assad came to power 11 years ago, that he would be a more liberal leader, but it seems he was stopped from doing that by government hardliners. I mean, is that still the case? Is he still surrounded by a core of people who don't want to see change?
Well, I think there's widespread speculation at the moment that who actually runs the country, and this speculation has been going on since Bashar assumed power in 2000. There is widespread belief that perhaps the security chiefs are the ones who are calling the shots, quite literally, and that Bashar doesn't really have much control over them. On Thursday, Bashar al-Assad announced through his advisor, Buthaina Shaban, that he has ordered all the security forces not to open fire, but the following day, on Friday, yesterday, we saw that over 40 people were killed, 20 alone in the town of Sanamin. So perhaps Bashar al-Assad is not really in control of the situation, in which case I think there are perhaps calls for him to perhaps step down, or at least order the security forces to stop, and if they don't, then perhaps he should step down or resign or leave the country, simply to exonerate himself from what's been happening.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts there. Malid Al-Abdeh speaking to us live from London there.